Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day. My name is Daniel. I'm a part of the FI marketing team, and we're back again with a pretty stellar webinar for you guys. This time it's how to delegate tasks and remain focused as a startup founder. And with us, we have Isaac and Monty. And I know I'm going to butcher this, and I talked to them about it, right? It's Katana. I'm so sorry if I got that name wrong again. But anyways, yeah. We have a great session lined up for you guys. Akshay, why don't you bring them back on? While Isaac and Monty join us, just a brief intro about Catena. It's a platform that helps you hire the best overseas talent for your startup. Yeah, so while Isaac and Monty join us, why don't you guys tell me in the chat where you guys are coming in from, right? I'm based out of Pakistan. Uh, let's see who we have here. Let us know in the chat wherever you're calling in from. Sorry, joining us in from. We have Atlanta, we have Berlin, awesome. We have Florida, we have Chicago, Ottawa. We have a pretty international crowd basically, so that should be pretty awesome. Yeah, awesome, cool. Pittsburgh, Seattle, awesome. Isaac, Monty, thank you for joining us today. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hey Daniel, thanks so much for bringing us on here. Hey everyone, I'm Isaac Kassab. I'm based out of New York City. This is my business partner Monty.
Hey everyone, Monty. I'm based out of New York as well.
Hope everyone's having a
Awesome.
great day.
Yeah, awesome. So before we, get into it, I'd just like to let you guys know that after the event ends, we have a networking session. So the FI team will be here. Isaac and Monty might be joining us as well, and you guys can also talk to one another too, right? So yeah, if you have any questions, we have a button, a Q&A button. Drop all your questions there, and I'll help Isaac and Monty go through them. Isaac and Monty, I'm just gonna let you guys take the stage.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Appreciate it. All right, guys. An absolute pleasure to be jumping on with you. Monty and I have been building Catena now for over a year, though we've been hiring overseas for the past 4. Today, we want to talk about how to delegate and focus as a founder. Crazy journey, as all of you know, starting a new venture. Definitely a lot of hardship and challenges. And, one of the most spoken about challenges is around hiring, making sure you're able to delegate properly and grow your business. And so we thought of having this conversation after it was really the starting point of this business. Monty, if you want to jump into the next slide. So a little bit about us. We launched Catena to hire and train EAs for over 70 executives and over 100 different candidates that we've had for our previous ventures. Most of our clients being YC-backed founders. A bit about myself, born in Venezuela, raised in Miami, went to Babson for undergrad where I studied entrepreneurship and real estate. Spent the last 10 years building businesses in the real estate sector as well as the tech sector, specifically for real estate, where I was fortunate enough to meet my business partner, Monty. We started a great relationship and joined forces in building a great pipeline of candidates out of the Philippines, where he's from. Monty, if you want to share a bit about yourself.
Yeah. So born and raised as well in the Philippines before coming to school in the US. I went to Wharton for my undergrad. Post that, I ended up founding a company called Ascend in Canada. We mainly help real estate developers scale out their property management software. And so help real estate developers with over 20,000 units. As part of that, ended up hiring multiple folks from back home in the Philippines. Post that, came back to the US, worked for an ABA therapy company where our entire back office operations were also based out of Manila. And now I run a seed stage fund where I met, which is really how we ended up starting with Catena, was Isaac and I had already proven out that we could hire massive teams based out of the Philippines where we could find people that were just super sharp, skilled generalists that could take on any type of operations roles that anyone really that you would find maybe right out of college in the US could. And so from there, we ended up starting to help out YC founders, and at this point have helped mainly C to Series A founders as well as VCs hire just their main chief of staff / executive assistant type people.
Awesome. Let's run to the next slide. So in that, Monty and I realized that, as early stage builders, we had a crazy amount of things we needed to get done, and far too much of it, we just couldn't handle all of it, really. So we started putting our heads together and thinking, how do we start delegating? Monty came with the idea early on to hire executive assistants for ourselves. He mentioned to me that he had access to a lot of friend groups and top university contacts in the Philippines, where we could go out and hire phenomenal employees for fraction of American salaries, but also be able to give some of these Filipino talent, 30% up to 2 times or 3 times the salary that they were making back home. And that's where we started. We quickly figured out that we needed to learn how to delegate well. And what we're going to go over today, like why delegation matters, delegation hacks, what founders get wrong with hiring an assistant or hiring in general, how to hire the right assistant, the right operator, and best practices for onboarding those individuals to your business. Monty, you can hit it. So, taking a step back, everyone here is starting their journey as an entrepreneur. Maybe it's not your first time, maybe it is, but what everyone can understand is that one of the biggest, challenges we'll face is how to scale out your team. So if your business has already started to see some traction, if you have an idea and it's starting to go well, delegation is really your only path to viability, because there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to get done, and you won't be able to do it alone. What's really important to remember is that sooner or later you will have to hire phenomenal talent if your business has legs. And so now is a great time to start figuring out, how do I start flexing that muscle? How do I really learn how to delegate and hire? That way it doesn't have to get to the breaking point where the business is about to explode, you're completely burnt out, and you have absolutely no idea how to hire someone. So that's really why we're starting off here. So to get started, I thought one of the things we do with most of the founders and executives that we work with is we run them through an activity. Feel free to do it, or feel free to just listen in. But as a founder, it's a no-brainer that delegation is a top priority. So in your average week, think about every single thing you do. Break down your weekly hours, right? What are the tasks that I'm spending my time doing? This is something that we do with all executives. It seems so basic, but nobody spends a lot of time really writing out, where am I spending my time? How do I time audit on myself? So write out all of those tasks, or start to write them out. To the right of those tasks, once you're done writing them out, think through, how much time am I spending on this every week? What you'll start to notice is that a lot of the tasks that you're spending your time doing don't need to be handled by yourself. A lot of the things we start seeing from founders in general are outreach, rather to venture funds or to early stage clients or discovery partners, email follow-ups, scheduling, managing personal life. What we tend to see is that founders and executives have on average 15 hours worth of work that they don't need to do themselves. As you start building your company, you have to be very mindful of your time. Be very mindful of your energy levels. If you haven't already faced what the bottom feels like, it will come soon. And you really need to protect yourself in that energy to make sure that you are in the best mental and physical place you can be. And so if you've done this, if you're writing these activities as we speak, think about, like, really, where am I spending my time? If you don't have 15 hours or 10 hours worth of work that you don't need to do yourself, then you've already mastered delegation, likely, and this might not be the conversation for you. But we've spoken to executives from seed all the way through Series D and E in public companies, and every single person can go further in delegation. And so this is really something you want to think about. You'll notice repetitive work, research-based work, follow-up on outreach are the main areas here. Monty, you can go to the next slide. So now that you have this list of work that doesn't really need to be done by you, right? You have, let's say, we usually tell our executives, find the top 3 activities that are the most time-consuming. They could write a step-by-step guide on how to get it done. So that's what Monty and I do for ourselves, and that's what we do for our clients. We figure out what are the areas that you could delegate, what are those workflows, how do we write a perfect standard operating procedure for them, and how do we use new tools like Loom to teach our employees how to do these tasks and have a resource to always come back and figure, this is how Isaac does it, this is how I should do it. And so, like regular standard operating procedures, we write it down in Notion. We write down every single step in getting something done, and we record Loom videos at the same time to show the individual, this is how you should do that task. What you start to build are not only the responsibilities, but the how-tos. And this is just a really great first leap in teaching your employees how to do the work that you don't need to be doing yourself anymore. Next slide, Monty. Awesome. So what comes next? The second big activity that we advise our clients to do and executives is a personal user manual. Think about it. As you start hiring individuals, the most important thing is to make sure that they feel aligned to the vision of the company, that they want to build value for you and for the venture, and they want to align themselves with the growth of the company. The best way to do that is become personal. Get a mutual understanding of each other, help build the relationship. And so a lot of this tends to be information like, what are my personal values? What are my cultural practices? And there's a lot of other activities that we can get into here, which kind of dive deeper into who you are, what's your preferred method of scheduling? Do you have a preference in a tightly scheduled day or a more flexible approach? What type of schedule do you find most conducive to your productivity and why? How do I view trust, working relationships, and why? Why do I require to earn my trust? What do you need to do to have me trust you as an individual? What actions can cause a team member to lose my trust? So while these might seem very deep, Monty and I have been able to hire tens and tens and tens of employees, and within 1 week, feel like we've known them for many years. And it's because we're able to dive deep into who we are, what are our beliefs, and how to work with us to our best capacity. Diving deeper, you can think through expectations when things go wrong, response to certain triggers, communication channels, and guidance on how to follow up. And so these are just some of the ways that we help our clients really build that alignment with their new employees, their new assistants, or new operators as they try to scale out the business. It's really important to highlight, you want to set timelines for responses for certain activities, right? You want to make sure that the employee understands, this is what I expect from you to reach back to XYZ, be it a response to an email, be it a response to you individually on a report. And these are some of those activities that you start to build that really align you, especially if you're building a team remote, right? A lot of these things happen naturally in office, but as life evolves, remote work evolves. This is one of those activities that we find super important. Awesome. Next slide here, Monty. So what are some of the other things that we help our executives do? We train them and their assistants on email management. How do you start scoping out, how should we break down our inbox? One of the things that Monty and I both do is that we have our executive assistants manage our entire inbox into 3 different areas. FYI, which are basically, hey, these are emails that there's no follow-up item for me, Isaac, to handle, but my assistant just wants me to know this is the update. A specific secondary grouping, which is please handle, right? My assistant doesn't understand what this individual email is about. It's not a repetitive task. So they put it in this specific inbox for me to handle myself. And I have my assistant personally draft my responses to most of my inbox. And so she'll leave all of the emails that she's drafted in my voice directly in my inbox for me to review and send out. The second workflow, which I know Monty loves more than me, is voice dictation, right? You can speak 7 times faster than you can write. Monty and I early on built a Zap that allows us to voice record ourselves to certain activities and tasks we need done and zap them directly into Asana. That way our assistants can handle whatever task we're asking them to do. Something that we help our clients with and they love. And the third thing is creating consistent reporting habits, right? What are those responsibilities this employee is handling? How should they report to you? How do you track their success? It's extremely important with any employee, but especially your assistant, for them to feel like they're doing the right things. You want to make sure they stick with you long term. And so you want to give them that validation when they're doing things right, and the assistance and the heads up, hey, this could be something that could be improved. And so setting up these reporting habits, be it one-on-one conversations, end of week reports, weekly OKR review, are important areas to make sure that you have a long, fruitful relationship with your assistant. Next slide here.
Awesome. Thanks, Isaac. So for the second part of this chat, we wanted to go through how to find sort of why people hire the wrong executive assistants, how to find them, and how to onboard someone that can actually take on 10 to 15 to even 20 plus hours of your work every week. And so one of the things that we realize is most people think about hiring VAs in the wrong way, because they think of hiring them from large American companies. And especially in the context of the Philippines, this is completely wrong. So we find engineers, consultants, and law school graduates as founders' executive assistants for about $1,000 to $1,300 per month. And we tell our founders, you need to choose people like these as opposed to a career VA. Why? Because you want to find someone who has experience working with difficult, ambiguous concepts and is likely to apply the same hustle, learning all the skills you need them to. So the best types of hires we find fall into the archetype of the sharp, hungry generalist who serves more as a chief of staff to you, as opposed to, say, like a classic executive assistant who you think maybe only can do scheduling or can only respond to emails once in a while. The talent that we recommend is, like, think about this as someone who's maybe a new grad out of a high-end US university that can really do anything operations-wise that you ask them to, because they're just going to be able to learn really quickly. So these are some examples of some of the folks that we've hired in the past. Like Jolene was an analyst at Bain, became a customer success manager for a startup at $6 an hour. Josh became a chief of staff for about $8.5 an hour. Hilda, she had a master's in counseling and psychology and ended up becoming an operations coordinator for $7 an hour. So the thing that was common across all of these people where they were super sharp. They'd written papers in chemical regions, built financial projections, and studied international law. And that means that they'll be able to take ambiguous projects that you give to them and proactively execute them, which is really what ends up resulting in time savings for you, as opposed to having to tell them exactly what to do every single time. Now is the best time to hire EAs from the Philippines, where most employers that we spoke to think that they'll find the best assistants or hires really from Upwork, Fiverr, or even job websites like onlinejobs.ph. In the context of the Philippines, this is wrong. So top graduates from back home, including, say, all my high school classmates, work for local companies versus in back-end roles for bigger US corporations like Aetna, T-Mobile, or Cigna. So now, why would someone work for a local company even if they earn less money? Prestige plays a large part in the decision back home. So it's not prestigious to go to a top college and then work as an assistant for a US company. But COVID and remote work changed people's perspective over the past few years. So folks realized that they'd rather, one, be able to save 3 hours of commuting through traffic, where traffic in Manila is terrible, it's worse than LA, get 30% higher pay, and then work directly for a successful startup founder. Over the past few months, a lot of folks have been forced to go back to in-person work and are now choosing to quit and go remote instead. They're still not working for bigger BPOs though, because they see this as less prestigious and know that with these BPOs, which are like business process outsourcers, meaning they'll hire a team of Filipinos or folks from India as well, manage them, and then lease out their time to larger companies. The top talent still don't want to work for BPO type models because they know that they're going to be stuck in the same back-end role forever. The unlock that Isaac and I had was we started building relationships with top universities and pitched top graduates the idea of working with top founders like you guys instead. And people want to work directly with founders because then they know that there's a much higher chance of them being able to progress and to be able to learn from you guys. So given all of that and the big why now, how do you find them? So first hiring tip here is within the Philippines, you want to find university grads. on Facebook. Facebook is still huge back home. You can take a look at job groups like University of the Philippines Jobs and Internships, and I know this PDF is going to be shared out with all of you guys too, so you'll have access to the direct links after. DLSU Jobs and Internships too. And you can just post directly there, like, hey, looking for a super sharp generalist, XYZ, just post out your entire JD there, as opposed to going on bigger websites like Indeed, where you'll have to sort through a lot more noise. So some of the top universities that you want to take a look at in the Philippines when trying to find graduates are: one, University of the Philippines, Diliman. This university actually has a lower acceptance rate than UC Berkeley, because everyone in the country who gets in gets to study there for free, and it's a top university in the Philippines. And so anyone you get from here is generally very, very sharp and had to take a hard placement exam and pass it. De La Salle University, Ateneo de Manila, and University of Santo Tomas are some of the other ones that you want to be looking at to be able to figure out sort of higher correlation, at least, of folks who are going to be these sharp generalists. Hiring tip 2 is focus on poaching from top startups and local companies. So a lot of these startups are going to be underpaying compared to what you can. They'll be paying around $3-4 an hour, and so even you offering $8-9 an hour is already double what they would be earning previously. Some examples of these top local companies are Procter & Gamble, Nestle, are the multinationals that a lot of folks want to go to. Universal Robina Corporation and Unilab are local, larger companies that a lot of top grads go to. And then Shopee and MedGrocer are some of the top startups. Shopee especially, we love finding folks from, because they tend to have a very, very good screening process, very high brand recognition as well. But they underpay versus a lot of the market. And so people here at Shopee are just very burnt out compared to other folks within this industry, and generally are pretty open to working for other US companies. Third thing that we recommend is to set up proper tests where you can really test for: one, productivity; two, ability to work with ambiguity; and three, attention to detail. So what we do in our process, which we found is highly effective, is a two-step process. So this, of course, is a very abridged version of what we run internally at Catena, but some things that you guys can do is: one, start with a top grading interview. So top grading interview is it's you asking the candidates multiple questions with the expectation that you want to figure out the why and how of each candidate. So you'll be asking them sample questions like: tell me about a time you had to manage a complex project. Tell me about a time you disagreed with your manager and pushed for your own opinion. And what you want to see here is how specific are these candidates able to be with their responses. The more specific, the better, because that actually means they probably were the ones that achieved the results. You want to ask them a lot of deeper dive questions like: okay, how did you do this? Why was this the goal that you set versus this other goal? And what you want to do here is be able to start getting an understanding of, in any situation you put them in, what are the driving factors and how do they think about problem solving through something. The second thing that you want to do here then is run them through a trial project. So the project should mirror what they will do with you. So for example, as a founder focused in sales, you might want to have them find potential customers, get their email addresses, and then draft up sample cold emails to them. If you're a VC, maybe you want someone to go in Crunchbase, take a look at all different startups within a certain category, and then draft up outreach as well to them. Now, you want to be intentionally ambiguous here, because you want to test whether your future assistant is proactive enough to, one, learn about the space on their own, and two, know when they need to ask you questions. And this is one of the biggest things that we found is the difference between someone who's successful or not. Is the most successful hires, assistants especially, will know when to ask questions, as opposed to others who end up just going through the process and then coming to you and having to churn all of their work and redo it. Now, given those three tips, what are some best practices that we found when onboarding folks after you've already hired someone? So the first one here is you need to be really aware of cultural best practices. So these were a lot of things I had to deal with myself when I moved from the Philippines to the US, where Asian work norms are very different from North American or EU ones. We ended up interviewing over 40 plus operators that we hired for US based companies and asked them the best practices they wish their teams had told them about when they started. So these were all folks that we had placed into companies. We created a guide on this, which you can actually find on our website. You can sign up to receive this. But the three biggest things that we found are number one, being able to encourage pushback. So I'm going to read word for word what a candidate said. It's so she mentioned you're free to give feedback without fear of retaliation. And that's huge back home, at least, is a lot of folks are taught that they can't really push back or even give feedback, because if they do, then their managers get mad at them or will try to fire them. And so you want to model out this behavior for the first month. Anytime someone pushes back to you, asks you different questions, you want to be able to use a lot of positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement in the culture or context of the Philippines also works much better than sort of getting mad at people, negative reinforcement, because then that just makes them communicate to you much less. And the second biggest thing really is over communication. You want your person, especially when we're working remote, to be able to tell you hey, this is what I'm thinking of working on today. This is what I just got done, at least for the first part, so you can try and understand how well they do in terms of timelines and also in terms of prioritization. The third thing that you want them to know is letting them know it's okay to ask questions earlier on, and even framing this as telling them hey, if you don't understand something, one way that you can ask a question is do 10% of the project first. Come to me with 10% of the project and ask me hey, does this look up like the final output that you want to receive from me? That way you save your time and you save their time as well, because you're both able to fully align much earlier on in the process. So that's a quick hack that saves a lot of our executives a lot of time. Second thing for onboarding is making sure that everyone has North Star metrics. So you want to identify North Star metrics that are most relevant to the team, and then determine measurable metrics within a specific time frame. So usually 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month goals for these hires, and be able to tell them hey, we expect you to be able to get to this, and you to be able to proactively ask questions to figure out how you get to this with us. Some examples of measurable metrics are after 1 month, for example, achieving certain levels of customer satisfaction. After 3 months, reducing customer churn rate. After 6 months, launching a new product service or surpassing quarterly sales targets. You want to be very specific and measured with this, and then be able to check in on whatever cadence you decide with your hires, so that they know, one, how to report things to you, and then two, also what timeline they need to get all of these done with. So those are our guides around onboarding, and we just want to leave you guys with this, that opportunity isn't created equal across the world, but ambitious talent is. And that's something that I saw myself moving to the US from the Philippines, and that we see day in, day out, when we just get amazing testimonials from our founders who end up hiring folks who are just super sharp and talented from back home in the Philippines, but don't have opportunities in our country to be able to really shine within the startup setting. Happy to answer any questions, and also leaving you guys with our emails down here. If you guys want to just reach out to us at any point, very happy to chat about your current processes, think through how you can delegate much better, and also give any tips around hiring the best types of operators from abroad. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Monty. I thought it was pretty great. I think you see all the emojis that you guys are getting at the bottom of your screen. The folks loved it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us. It's always great to share the very hard lessons we've learned. There's a saying in Spanish that goes "a los coñazos," which is through the hits.
Yeah.
So it's always great to share these learnings that we've gone through over the past couple of years.
Awesome.
Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so we'll move on to questions, but before we move on to questions, we have this super quick poll that we want to ask you all, right? As a startup, and this is so that Monty and Isaac, they kind of get an idea of, let me know if you guys can see the poll though, show on screen. Yeah, here we go. Right, so as a startup founder, have you already made your first hire? Yes, no? What are we looking at? Guys, you guys can vote on the screen. Right. So we have a bit of a mix, a lot of solo founders, it seems like, right? Right. Okay. So at Founder Institute, what we do is we always encourage startup founders to delegate, right? The first thing that you should always do is kind of look for a co-founder because the startup journey, and you guys are also, as you know, as co-founders, you guys know this better than anybody else, that it's kind of a lonely journey. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's always good to have someone to share that burden with, right? So let's get started with the questions, right? So we have a good idea of where our audience is at in terms of hiring. We'll close this poll. Right. So I had a question that popped into my messages, and it was this: when you hire from overseas, what tactics do you use to determine how much to pay them?
Yeah, I think salary has a lot to do with expectations and market. This is one where we're very fortunate to be very tapped into our main market, and so we have a very good understanding of what current market rates go for. If you're not working with a specialized group like us, I would say you could, one way you could learn is by hosting a good amount of interviews and kind of ranging out what people will pay or what people expect to be paid. Sorry, but it's been through a lot of learning that we figured out what the right rate is, and our go-to strategy is to find the best operators and overpay them at least a 30% rate to motivate them to make this shift. Mostly because if you're finding the right people, they're usually not looking for jobs remote online. Because you want to be finding the top 1 to 5% of talent, there's a lot of identifying the right individual and making sure you can convince them for the long-term opportunity they'll have with you.
Right. Awesome. Monty, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, another thing that you guys can do is go on, say, go on LinkedIn or Indeed or these other job boards and start seeing too, like what are other employers posting out in the market. It's really that plus at the end of each interview asking people like, hey, what were you paid in your last job? And then even if they blow it up by a little bit, after you go through enough conversations, you'll get enough of guidelines around how much the range is.
Right, awesome. So kind of sticking to the theme of paying, right? So we have this question from Nandish. What platforms would you recommend to keep track of, for tax purposes? Let's say if you're hiring from the US or Canada.
Yeah, so in general, we'd recommend, for us at least, we found using Deal extremely helpful. They take care of a lot of the employer of record relationship. When hiring, so they're really helpful when hiring from Canada and also from the Philippines. I've done that for my previous company because we had a team both in Canada and the Philippines. One thing to think through when hiring from the Philippines, especially, is most people actually want to be hired as contractors as opposed to employees because then their take home amount is much higher. So in the past, I actually had a team of like 40 contractors, try to bring them on as employees. And they were like, no, please, I want to stay as a contractor. And that way, like my all in pay take home will end up being much higher. So deal as a contractor is generally how a lot of our executives end up hiring their assistants.
Right. So kind of sticking to the theme of tools, right? You guys mentioned Loom for instructions, and are there any other tools that you would recommend, especially for somebody who's maybe hiring from the overseas for the first time?
I think like general tech stack, Notion, Slack, Gmail, Loom is a great way to share. Like this is a really easy way of doing this.
LastPass.
LastPass, which is a password sharing tool that keeps you protected. Those are the main tech stacks we recommend.
Yeah, and then if you guys want to go a bit extra as well, you can always use remote device management software like Kanji. So if you have a team of contractors all using Macs, You can install Kanji. What that does is it allows you to be able to control their laptops remotely, be able to delete things. And so, especially if you're worried about a lot of privacy or security, LastPass and then Kanji are two tools that a lot of our execs like to use as well.
Right, awesome. So, okay, so this kind of veers away from the executive assistant team we've had, but Adam wants to ask any resources you recommend from hiring overseas. You guys have talked about that, but more so, any advice on hiring overseas software engineers? Anything about that?
Monty?
Yeah, cool. So from our end, actually, we focus purely on operations roles. We don't hire engineers, and so we're best suited to speak about like how do I hire just extremely good SDRs, operations hires, and we never want to overextend. So which is why we decided to just niche down into, hey, both Isaac and I have been head of operations from multiple
Right.
companies, and that's really where we know. Another company that we've heard is really good at hiring overseas software engineers that we partner up with is called Aloha. That's ALOA.co. So they're a good resource to be able to check out for the engineering side of things.
Yeah, and if you
Awesome.
end up reaching out to them, let them know that Monty at Catena sent them out. They'll take care of you.
Awesome. So Adam, there you go. Right. So I guess this is something a lot of people have been wondering. As a startup founder, right? At what stage do you begin searching for an EA, and how do you kind of determine like this is the right time to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that in general, you'll want to bring on an EA when you have enough work on your plate that you think that, wow, I really shouldn't be spending my time on this. If you're extremely early, like if you're only just ideating and you haven't had any market conversations, you don't really know what your idea is yet, it might be a bit too soon. But alternatively, like the way I think about it is hiring is very challenging, and EA will make your life in general a lot better. But starting to flex that hiring muscle through EA hiring earlier on before things get very hectic, that's probably your best bet. It's kind of like an exercise to start learning how to hire well. And so Monty and I have always been very, efficiency driven. We're always thinking about how do we keep our headspace only focused on what's most important. So we both hired EAs in our last ventures, basically the day we started the ventures, because we knew there was going to be a lot of things that were going to be time consuming, rather one-off or repetitive, that we don't need to handle ourselves.
Right, awesome. Monty, would you like to add to that?
I think all that all that's great stuff from Isaac. Nothing else from my end.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, and this is, I think, something that's kind of obvious through your talk, right? Particularly because you guys focus on the Philippines a lot. A common question that kind of comes up, especially when people are hiring overseas, is, will there be discrepancies or, difficulties because of the written or spoken language? So anything that you guys would like to add over here?
Yeah. So from my end, one of the reasons we actually chose the Philippines is because everyone learns it at a much earlier stage. Like I was born and raised in the Philippines for the first 18 years of my life, and this is how I speak because throughout middle school, high school, English was the language of instruction, and within Asia. So that's the way to think about it too. Is within like there are a few countries where you can really get really sharp operators. You can go to LATAM, you can go to India, Pakistan, you can go to Southeast Asia. But really, out of a lot of these countries, especially within Southeast Asia, the Philippines is the only country where English is the means of instruction. We were actually like a colony of the U.S. for more than 40 years, which a lot of people don't know. But because of that, a lot of us think in English. There is, of course, still a big discrepancy between general English as opposed to English with people from top universities, where everyone's required to write papers and theses and everything in English, which is why we end up hiring and created very solid relationships with professors at these top universities that are on the deck. The other big thing to look out for here is a difference in terms of cultural context. So a lot of language in the Philippines is going to be way too formal when you start. So everyone's like, dear sir, dear ma'am. They're going to say a lot of like weirder things that you wouldn't say, especially because American language is a lot more casual. And so one thing that's what I would say is the biggest thing that you need to train out of folks when hiring from the Philippines is that over formality. You need to tell them like, hey, like you just need to be able to be casual. One thing you can even do that we do with a lot of our assistants is have them go on GPT and put in what they're writing and say, rewrite this in an American voice for an American, like North American based client. And then having them start pattern matching, like, okay, this is the type of language that it's turning my language into. And after a month or so of doing this, you're going to be able to get the casualness in the US language. But really, if you look at the top percent of candidates from the Philippines, you already have that cultural context of being an American colony, having grown up speaking English. And then at the top levels, these folks do have to have very solid written communication for a lot of their university level academics. And so you're able to find people with pretty solid English, written and spoken. The other thing that you want to do, though, is make sure that before hiring them, you put them through a series of trial projects and tests. Let's say if you need them to be writing emails out, then you want them to actually write a set of like 5 to 10 emails for you, and then start seeing like, is this something that is trainable or is it just so off for me? And that's what we do at Catena is we have like a half-day live simulation with over like seven exercises. Each of these exercises testing out a different thing. Like, are you able to write really well? Are you able to speak really well on like a video? Are you able to run research? Are you able to work with ambiguity? If we give you a project where the instructions are wrong or the instructions are incomplete. So I think that's really the best way to be able to test things out and waste less time later on.
Right, awesome. I think that was a pretty detailed answer, and I think there's like a fair bit of nuance when it comes to hiring from the overseas, and a lot of what you talked about addresses that, because as a founder, right, there's like a ton of reservations you have about trusting people with your startup and kind of looking at a talent pool that's completely new to you. And while as we kind of get towards the end of our Q&A, I have this one last question for you. And this has kind of come up in our chat. But so, yeah, so I'll just post it here. Although it can be never foolproof, how do you determine you can trust someone enough with your confidential information? Right.
Yeah, it's a great question. Monty, I'll kind of let you take the reins, but I always find it interesting when people ask this. It's the same question. How do you trust any employee in general, right? That's my train of view. I think that what we've been able to do at Catena is find a really strong way to disqualify candidates that we don't think align to strong values. And so it's really about how good are you at figuring out if somebody's trustworthy. If it's somebody that you're hiring locally or if it's someone you're hiring remotely. It's all about that trust. And that's my perspective, Monty. Curious if you have any other thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for me. It's like, it's the same thing as like, how do I trust this new grad from the US that I'm going to hire that's not going to be in the same city as me? Sure, maybe the laws apply more here. You can maybe try and sue someone. Yeah, there's a higher likelihood if it really goes down to that. But I think in general, it's very much setting up. Like there's two things. One, making sure within the interview process that you set up a very solid cultural interview and make sure that you understand like why do people do the things that they do and see if that's a fit with why you do the things that you do. And then secondly, also being very careful within the first few weeks. So always using LastPass, sharing out that LastPass key as opposed to sharing your exact password so you can change it at any time. And at the same time, you can always first spend the first month with someone without giving them a lot of more sensitive data. Maybe first month, 2 months, it really varies per person, but some of our execs will prefer to spend some time first on their own, seeing how well someone works with them as a trial period before giving deeper access out.
Right. And I think this trust thing, it really goes back to like a cultural and like a value alignment, right? And this is what we kind of talk about when we, when startup founders come to us looking for co-founders, like the first thing that needs to, match perfectly is the values that you have, and the cultural fit, right? So yeah, Isaac, Monty, thank you so much for joining us for this super informative session. Thank you for taking out the time to be here.
No, thank you guys for having us. As mentioned, I'll put out my email as well on the chat below. Please reach out whenever. We're super happy to chat with you guys, and then just give any tips.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So do you guys have any parting words? And while Isaac and Monty, close things out, you guys the audience, would you let us know what you think about the session? Please use the emojis right at the bottom, right? Awesome. Yeah, getting a ton of love there. Isaac, Monty?
Thank you guys for having us. It's always great to share these learnings with everyone. We built Catena to help phenomenal candidates abroad, where Monty in the Philippines, where we've been hiring and had a lot of success, find phenomenal companies and leaders to work with. That's our goal at the end of the day. We want to remove the barriers that have impeded some of these phenomenal employees in the Philippines from making the most amount of money or working extremely well aligned with founders. And so while there are one or two ways Monty and I could change our business model to make more money for ourselves, at the core of our values and our business is to align phenomenal talent with phenomenal founders and incentivize them in the best way possible. And so if we can help you, if you're looking for the best talent abroad, reach out. We're here for you. And if it's just to ask us questions or ask for some support in any way, we're also here for you.
No, I just want to reiterate that. Yeah, because my favorite line here is opportunity isn't created equal, but talent is. And we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to do direct placements with you guys, as opposed to most businesses which end up really doing like a managed service model and taking a cut. We just want to be able to help these folks work directly with you so that they're fully aligned on growing with your company as you get much bigger. So appreciate you guys having us on, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll be back with another super informative webinar next week. Check out our fi.co events page to stay updated. Have a great day, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.